Welcome, one and all, to our event, Seeing Opportunity in Devastation Stories to Inspire. Now, you would have followed in the trend that we've been speaking a lot about what's uppermost on all our minds in terms of what we're experiencing as far as load shedding is concerned, as far as um, to some degree either water shortages or water shedding is concerned, whatever the case might be, the knock on effects of load shedding. I like. I had a thought while I was thinking about this. In Afrikaans, they call it beerdkrag, and it was. I didn't quite fully understand what they meant by beerdkrag, but I get it now. And direct translation is sharing power, and that's precisely what load shedding does. Is that we share power. For some of us, at some of the time, we don't have any, while others have, and so on and so it cycles. And met somebody yesterday that shared how in their community they share alternative energy. They share alternative power, whether it's solar power, whether it's sharing output from the generator. But it's become quite a community task. And I've been thinking about that because, when we're experiencing pressure and we begin to stress, is because we're carrying so much on our individual shoulders that we begin to find the circumstances stressful. And I just wanted to say, just as I hand over to Ed, that you know what? Look up. Look for creative ways to get involved in your community and learn how to share. Thanks, Ed. Over to you.
Thanks, Jacques. Yes, absolutely. We had a wonderful example where I stay. Um, we were in an area where we had no power for 10 days. Um, and this was over a very large area of our community. And 10 days is a horrendous time if you're not prepared for it to be without power. And I understand only too well that there are many, many communities that never have power. And so, we we had a bit of that feeling. Um, and that was good, but I would rather have those communities being in a position where they have the same kind of uh, privileges and facilities as I have. But that's aside. During that time, there were a lot of elderly people in this community, and they were without light, they were without cell phones, they were without laptops, they were without communication capabilities, and that became a very dangerous situation. And so those people who had power, solar power, I don't think there's any wind power in this community, but those people who had solar power became the charging stations for everyone. So in my unit, it was fairly routine to have anywhere between 10 cell phones on charge and probably two or three LED lights and a couple of laptops. It was just normal. Um, and people I've never seen in my life before would come and say, "Would you mind?" And we got to meet a whole lot of people, made new friends, and I know a lot of the other people who have solar in this area were doing the same thing. So that whole thing about community power is, pun not intended, is definitely there. Um, that happens across the board. And that got me thinking as well of the opportunities that again abound in times where there is deprivation or stress or anger or whatever. And we talked about the obvious ones of load shedding and perhaps water outages or water shedding. And one of the things that we missed was the outrage at increasing prices, the outrage at, for instance, food prices. And I've noticed how many people And I am in an area where there are retired people, so they have the time to do this. But I've noticed how many people actually grow some of their own food. They grow vegetables, they grow fruit. There are quite a few fruit trees around here. Um, and again, those are often community, almost community property. You know, someone with a lemon tree, and they say, please help yourself. Don't even bother to come and ask. Um, and I know several people have very active vegetable gardens. That's just a starting point. Yes, food has become very expensive, and food now is largely the province of the supermarkets. And you would think that big would be necessarily cheaper because of the economies of scale, but somehow that equation hasn't worked as well as it should. And so there are a lot of small farmers who produce vegetables and produce them at half the price of the supermarkets and produce beautiful ones. There was a fine example during the COVID outbreak down near the beachfront in Durban, where a lot of homeless people were gathered together in a camp behind the beachfront. And one of them was a horticulturist. And he set up a vegetable farm there, small vegetable farm. And they produced the most incredible vegetables at very low prices, um, and supplied anyone. Their biggest challenge was not production, was not assistance, was not business mentoring or anything else. Their biggest challenge was getting enough customers because people didn't want to go into a, what was essentially a camp for homeless people. But people did, and there was a stream of of expensive motor cars going to buy these beautiful fresh vegetables from these farmers right near the beachfront. Somebody else years ago had the bright idea that they would use the rooftop where they lived or in an apartment block to make honey. And they made honey in the center of Cape Town. Uh, became quite famous. Urban honey. Several buildings had vegetable farms and sometimes flower farms on the top of them. So, out of the stressed areas, there are always multiple opportunities. And I think to myself, if there were some really clever entrepreneurs, wouldn't there be a market in people in selling kits for instance, balcony vegetable production? The pots, the potting soil, the seed, the instructions, watering can, and whatever else you need. Um, isn't that a market? Wouldn't it be an advantage? Because you only have to walk into a supermarket and look around at prices and you get horrified. So there are lots of little spin-off markets from when um, things otherwise go wrong. I'm sure there will be micro insurers. I'm sure there will be lots of other people, um, communicators that are not using the major networks, and all sorts of opportunistic spin-offs from where things are getting expensive and in fact perhaps out of the reach of many of the citizens. So there will be opportunities out there, and some people have developed massive businesses in seeking out that sort of opportunity. So don't simply think of replacing or joining a bandwagon of saying, well, solar is now the in thing, or water tanks are now the in thing, let's get on to that. Look around the fringes and say, what would be a great business opportunity around those fringes associated with the lack of, for instance, water? Waterless gardens, low water needs plants, all sorts of things. So, plenty of opportunity out there. But there are also threats when we run our businesses. And one of the threats is that something will go disastrously wrong somewhere along the line. And that's what I want to talk about today and perhaps the next time we meet. What happens if it all goes horrifically wrong? So you send a quotation to your major customer. It's absolutely routine. This customer accounts for about half your turnover. You send a routine quotation to them, which has happened hundreds, maybe thousands of times before, and you get a notice back saying, "We are so sorry, your quotation is not accepted." And you phone them in a panic to be told that they've found an alternate supplier and they won't be using you in the future. Now, half your business is dependent on that. Half your staff is dependent on that. Probably 90% of your profits. Now you're sitting with all the staff and all the machinery and all the capability to supply that customer, and you don't have the sales coming from that customer. What happens then? And what normally happens is first panic sets in, which is very understandable. And then, secondly, the immediate reaction is we have to retrench everyone to cut our costs down so that we can survive. Well, retrenchment's bad on two fronts. First of all, you lose skills. Secondly, you lose trust of your staff because people have long memories. And thirdly, it may not work. It may not be enough. You may have cut the heart out of your business and find your business doesn't survive anyway. So rather look around and see what you can achieve without going to retrenching many of your staff. You may have to retrench, especially the people directly involved in that customer. But if you can, try and keep all your people. So I wrote a post on a blog some time ago about this one, and we could actually put the numbers up, although this is not a forum which is easy to display numbers. But essentially, my solution to this was to say a whole lot of little steps. So the first thing you do is you call your staff together and you tell them honestly what has happened. And you say to them, we are going to have to make changes. Um, who would like to, uh, and give them a choice. Would they prefer to go on lower pay, um, take a pay cut, or um be retrenched? And some will opt for retrenchment and some. But in my experience, most of the staff actually want the business to survive. They have goodwill towards the business, aside from the fact that it's their source of income. So many of them will actually take a lower pay package. The second thing that you need to do is to say, right, well, what's happened now is I have a whole lot of capacity, materials, people, production machinery, or whatever it is, that is available and ready to supply this stuff, but not being used. So this is a great time to go out to one of your competitors' customers, explain to them exactly what has happened, and tell them they have a one-off opportunity to get from you the products that they use, but get them essentially at cost price. then at least you're paying your labor. You're using up the materials that you bought for that customer you lost. Um, you're using the production capacity for that. And that takes you off the hook for another maybe month or something like that. The other way of doing things is to look very hard at your pricing. A tiny change in your pricing will often produce magic results in your cash flow and your profitability, depending on the nature of your business. Um, and often will have no difference in the amount of sales that you make. So you can look at your costs, but that's probably not where you're going to find your solution. You can look at your sales. You can try and up your sales by a few percentage points. And there are many techniques that you can do to do that, especially when everyone's in a panic and is prepared to do a lot of extra work very quickly in order to get out of the hole that you're in. And you can sell your way out of a hole like that. So there are lots of solutions. Incidentally, if anyone is in this horrifying position, um, they can talk to me directly. I'm not hard to find, and I can give them the details of the model that I drew up in that blog post of quite a few years ago. So there are solutions to the fact of even losing a catastrophic amount of your customer base, like 50% or something like that, and coming away surviving and having lost very few of your skill set or your capability. And of course, once the thing starts growing again and building and paying, you have a staff which you have a huge loyalty towards, and they have a huge loyalty towards you. You might actually be better off. There are lots of businesses where their worst catastrophe turned long term to be the best thing that ever happened to them. So you can survive those sort of things. And then what about um, losing your key players? Suddenly, your star salesman, and with him, your best technical people, depart for an alternate employee. So suddenly, the person you've depended on, the person that was very key to your business, is no longer in your business and is perhaps even against you in competition. Well, once again, one of the first things that people do is to say, "I'm going to, I'm going to go for one of the lawyers and, enforce a restraint of trade or something like that on them." That really works. It does sometimes, but it's not the solution. You've lost the staff, and take it on the chin. There was a more attractive offer somewhere else. The person thought that their career and everything else would be better off somewhere else, and they've left. Now get over it. This gives huge opportunities within your organization for people who need to be trained, for trainees, for promotions, and for all sorts of other possibilities. And maybe you're going to have to need to buy in some skills for a while. Yeah, that happens. You can again get by with it. But what you should not do is spend the next 3 weeks brooding and planning revenge on this traitor who's let you down. That's not going to help you at all. Rather work towards growing the business despite. And once again, you might well find that that star person who you thought was the best thing ever was actually holding back a whole lot of other people because they didn't want anybody else to compete with them. That's been a very, very common situation where once that star person disappears, everybody else just blooms because they now have opportunities that they were being held back from. So, once again, it's something which is survivable, something where if you think carefully and you don't go into blind panic mode, you can easily get over. And then the third one, which I want to talk about today, and probably the most horrific one of all. What happens if you lose all the money? If suddenly your bank re- refuses to pay a debit order, and you get a notification that your bank is not paying your debit orders, and you go clicking into your internet banking or your phone app, and you find there's no money in your account, and there were a couple of million rand there a few a few hours ago. What happens then? And after a lot of tracing, you find that a trusted person who may be staff, maybe a partner, has taken all the money and has been taking the money over an extended period of time. Now, I've been involved in an organization where exactly that happened, where suddenly the realization came that not only was there no money in the account anymore, despite having checked the bank statements and showing a very healthy balance, but there was also a whole line of creditors demanding immediate payment of long outstanding debts. And there was fraud, and there was all sorts of things that went on. People who steal money can be incredibly creative. In this case, they even forged an audit outcome, an auditor's report, and set of annual accounts. Um, and suddenly you are in a position where, in this particular case, 2 million rand had gone missing, and the organization owed 1 million rand, and they had no money and no immediate source of income. And they were in really, really serious situation. And everyone got very, very angry, of course, and very excited. And there were serious thoughts that it was probably best just to fold the towel and close the organization down. Go into voluntary or go into liquidation wouldn't have been voluntary. But once again, with some careful thinking and some teamwork together, the organization survived. And we found the key. We said, let's preserve our remaining sources of income very carefully and reorganized our banking affairs so that this was impervious to the fraud. We even negotiated with the fraudster to say, if you tell us where everything went, we can maybe uh, discuss um, a reduced sentence for the fraudster, but that didn't work very well. Um, but the most important thing that we did, and this is the lesson that I want to share with everyone in this, if you do find that situation where horrifyingly you have no money and you owe everyone money, the first thing to do is to go to all of those creditors and be open about what has happened. And be open about what your options are right now. And in this circumstance, the CEO of the organization did a fantastic job of doing that. Went and negotiated with all of the creditors, managed to stave off summonses, managed to stave off insolvency proceedings, managed to talk people into patience, and as a plan developed, and you have to develop a plan very rapidly in that circumstance, and it has to be a credible plan. As the plan developed, The CEO went to all of these creditors and said, "Here's the plan. Sorry, it's not ideal, but that's what we're going to do in the meantime, and this is how we're going to try and make it up to you afterwards." And gradually, over time, it all suddenly the problem went away. It did take time, took years, but a recovery from a blow like that was uh, a great teamwork, something which on the surface was unlikely, and which in most organizations they wouldn't have tried. But it was a great example that even in that circumstance, that dreadful circumstance, you can put together survival tactics. You can actually make it work for you. And one of the strange things that happened was that several of the creditors eventually waived their debit. They wrote off their debt. Um, they said they don't have any reasonable chance of recovering it. They believe that, but they bore no malice. They recognized that what had happened was not anybody's fault within the organization. The money that was stolen, incidentally, was irrecoverable. It had been used for gambling. It was all gone. So, sobering lesson there. But three really serious situations: you lose your biggest customer, you lose your best staff, you lose all your money. And in all of those circumstances, people have recovered from them and often been better off as an outcome. So, when disaster strikes, yes, have a moment of panic, but don't make it too long. You don't have time. Start thinking and think strategically. Jacques, that's, I think, about where we should leave it for this week. I see we're just about on our time limit. And, if anyone has any queries about this, please feel free to contact us. I
Yeah.
would like to make an announcement, though, that people might be very interested in, anyone who listens to this blog, to this podcast. Um, and that is on Tuesday, the 11th. The virtual chapter of the Public Speakers Association of South Africa will be holding an online meeting in the evening at 6:30, and the format of that meeting will be a panel of five of the most experienced public speakers in South Africa who will be interacting directly with anyone who attends. So if you have an ambition to become a public speaker, or if you are a public speaker but you want to polish your craft, this is an unrivaled opportunity to talk to some of the real leading lights in the business of public speaking, the people who charge very high fees and who are highly successful and know most of the answers, and to chat to them directly. And the cost of attending this meeting is zero. It's free. Anyone can join in. And I would encourage people who even just thinking about this to come along. All you have to do is to go to the website, the Public Speakers Association of SA. That is www.psasa.co.za. Look at the events calendar, look for the next meeting of the virtual chapter, and you will get a booking indication there. You can book, the booking is free, but you must book to attend. So, come along. You won't get an opportunity like this again anytime soon, if ever. Thanks, Jacques. Thanks for the opportunity of just making that announcement.
Thank you, Ed. Um, just maybe to add, listening to this, and I would like the article that you referred to in the blog that you've published.
Mm.
Do you want to give out a contact as well? Email, perhaps?
Yeah, if anyone wants to contact me, they can contact me on my email address, ed at the marketing director, THE marketing director.co.za.
Excellent. Thank you, Ed, and lots of food for thought for those of us experiencing any of these things when we've lost our best customer or about to lose our best customer. The same thing about our best staff, and then horrors upon horrors. There's fraud in the company. I want to remind you, do forensic audits to check that out as soon as possible. And so, thank you, Ed, and I look forward to the next edition. Just to let our listeners know, our next edition will be in 2 weeks from today. Until we chat again 2 weeks from today.
Look forward to it.
Bye for
Cheers.
now.